The origination of this idea for Bradford to have his show here at MOA came from an idea that stemmed from the sculpture in the Frostig collection. We were originally having the Frostig collection here, which is the majority of it is sculpture, and Bradford is a painter who's known for his portraiture, and so we wanted to tie the two shows together, and we thought, well, it would be really interesting to have him do portraits of objects, and not a recreation of the object itself, but recreate the object in what you would do with a portrait and taking the life and the history of the person and pulling that from the object itself. So initially when I was visiting Bradford in his studio and we were discussing the ideas for the upcoming show, I was really intrigued with his orange chair. When most of his subjects in his portraiture series usually sit in the orange chair. So when we got talking about how to present the objects in the museum, we started talking about including portions of his studio because that's an integral part of his art making and his studio practice. I thought it would be really interesting to have the orange chair in the gallery here, and so when visitors come and go, they can actually feel the presence of the artist, feel the presence of the subject in the paintings by sitting in the infamous orange chair. So that's why the chair is in the gallery.
Hi, Bradford.
Hey, how's it going?
It's going well. I'm in the chair.
You're in the chair, yeah.
Will you tell us about the orange chair and the whole process of recreating your studio here in the museum?
The idea of painting these objects was sort of inspired by Andy, who asked me to recreate the studio. She knows that I paint portraits and that most people who I paint sit in the orange chair. So she had the idea of actually recreating the studio in the museum. The other part of the show here has to do with objects. And she said, what if you painted, portraits of objects? This has been the inspiration for most of the subjects that you see in the show. It's been unraveling and it's been peeling an onion. Every time I come here, there's a new element to it that adds to it.
One of the things that I've noticed when I bring my tours into this gallery is the expression on their faces when they walk in. And I ask them, without prompting, I say, what is the first thing that you notice? And most of them respond with the sense of smell, with the smell of the paint, because it's an intimate gallery.
The visceral nature of paint, of taking this material and using just your hands, and there's a stick with some brush on the end, but essentially there's nothing between you and this paint. I like to try to get as close to this emotional experience that I have with the paint. If you're looking at the painting, you get an emotional reaction, you get a connection to it, then you can start to find different elements as to why this painting is creating this reaction. I don't want to hide the journey. There's some painters who use certain brushes to cover up the campaign and the journey that they went on to paint it. And my goal is to let the viewer see the process and how I paint. And in doing that, they can hopefully have, that can transfer to the viewer my reverence, my emotion, my visceral reaction to the work.
What do you notice happens to your models or your sitters, as you call them, over time? What does time do, and how does time play into your work and what you see happens to the model?
Not very often is someone staring at someone for hours, very intently looking at every part of the subject, and I look in a way that maybe they've never been looked at before. So if you stare at someone and take the kind of time it takes to paint what I do in the portraits, there's an appreciation that the subject has for that time that's taken to do it, and it's also something I very much appreciate, for the subject to give me that kind of time.
So the experience from the standpoint of the model is one of maybe a little rigidity at the beginning, and kind of, how is he going to capture me? What is he going to expose?
Right.
And then I think over time, there's this melting away. It's really about the model or the sitter really relaxing and becoming present.
You can't explain it, and you can't even necessarily see it. You feel it. And there's something I'm trying to paint that I'm trying to get to with my models, that if they don't give it to me, it's a collaboration at the end of the day. Certainly doing a painting like this has to be the subject being willing to be for me to sort of excavate their emotions and their feelings. And so there has to be that connection. There's a tethering there that has to be there, or the painting never comes off.
Your painting process is called Alla prima, which translates as wet on wet.
Right. The reason for that is to not lose the connection to the emotional feeling that I have for what I'm painting. And if I can get it all done while the paint's wet, that's the basic idea. Some painters, they wait for something to dry, put on another layer and so on, but that's like building a brick wall to me. I lose the connection to my subject. I end up feeling like I'm just repeating some technical process. But if the paint's wet, then you're always putting paint into something that's already active, something that's already alive, and the paint that's already there has something to say. If I took too long and waited for it to dry and so on, again, I would just lose that spell, that connection to the painting.
It sounds to me like you have a really deep relationship with improvisation and just really being in the moment with your work. I mean, you're highly skilled, you're highly trained, and so you have this foundation of the painter's skill.
And I think you learn all these things, you get this foundation, you go to school, you study, you put all these tools in the toolbox, and you forget about all that, and you just react. And if you have the skill, then it's not like, well, I remember I have to do this here, and I have to always put this color underneath that to make it. You don't think that way, you just react.
By transforming one of our galleries into your studio space and surrounding the visitor with your work has been incredibly meaningful for our visitors. And it's wonderful for the MOA staff also to walk into the space and to see an active working studio. Yeah. It's wonderful to be able to interface with you and to see you interfacing with the public. And we're really glad and grateful that you opened up your own private studio practice to our community. Thank you so much.
This process has allowed me to react to the different visitors and the different interpretations of people who have seen the studio, and it's added, a whole different dimension to what I do, and I really am grateful for that, and I appreciate you guys giving me this opportunity. Thank you.